Hi, welcome. This is Ana Martinez with the School Community Huddle with Ana Martinez. We are here today focusing on second and fourth grade. Today we have two amazing special guests. Special guests, can you introduce yourself and the grade you teach and the number of years of experience?
Hi, I'm Raquel. I've taught for 9 years and 6 of those was with second grade.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I've been teaching fourth grade now for 5, but this is going to be my 10th year of teaching in total.
So here's my story. My second and fourth grade connection is I had the same teacher for second and fourth grade, Miss Rockman. She was amazing. And she was just like beautiful, and she loved her culture, and she was African American, and she really pushed me in both grade levels. Like, I remember in second grade, it's when we moved to a new city from Inglewood to Westchester, and she was just fabulous. And then in fourth grade, I had her again. I guess they must have moved her grade levels. And now that I think about it, I realized, oh my gosh, moving grade levels is such a big deal for a teacher, because you got to like learn the standards, learn the age level. So I'm just wondering, like, did you have any teacher more than once? Because I know some teachers, some schools do that on purpose.
Actually did. I had the same science and math teacher for fourth grade, fifth grade, and sixth grade because we cored. And it's funny because when I first started teaching, she was still teaching at my school. So it was one of those, like, now I'm teaching with my teacher. It was a cool experience.
Okay, so go ahead, Nicole.
I actually didn't have any teachers of the same ones back to back or consecutively, but I did have a really amazing fourth grade teacher who had a love of music. So he would sing gospel and opera on his own spare time, but he infused a lot of music and musicals into fourth grade. And that's something I remember about my fourth grade teacher.
So some fun things are Nicole is a great piano player, and Raquel actually went to the school where her mom was the principal, right?
I did.
Fun facts of today, y'all. All right, so second and fourth grade, let's learn. What is happening developmentally in a second and fourth grader? So think about that question. Think about what's happening in their little personalities. How would you describe a second grader's personality and a fourth grade personality? First of all, how old is a second grader? How old is a fourth grader?
So second graders are around 7 and 8, and I feel that they're coming to the end of that young elementary kinder phase where they know how to read and they're feeling a little bit more powerful, and they're almost getting to the point where they're reading to learn, not learning to read, which is really important. They're still cute. They're still little and naive and just amazing and just want to know everything and ask you those really random questions. And they're just really excited to learn. I love second grade.
A fourth grade age range is about 8 to 10. One thing that's really tough about fourth grade is there's a big jump in standards and what is asked of the kiddos from the early primary grades as they transition into the upper grade. So I do think that is one thing that's a little bit challenging. School gets very rigorous, especially in fourth grade.
Yeah, it does. So let's go into that. So Raquel, you said reading to learn, learning to read, and it's almost the transition. It's so funny because in our third grade podcast, they were like, oh, this is the age where they go into reading to learn. But in second grade, they're still learning to read. Let's think about reading for both of you. What are some of the main skills in reading that we are wanting to see in a second grader and a fourth grader at the end of the year?
By the end of the year, you would hope that their fluency, which means like how fast they're reading the words with automaticity, is pretty much nailed down. Like they can recognize words and those sight words are coming to them a lot faster. And towards the end of second grade, you would hope that their comprehension and their understanding of stories and deeper meanings and things like that are starting to become one of their strong suits. Now that fluency and figuring out what those words are is in the past, in that first grade, early second grade time.
For a fourth grader at the end of the year, we really are hoping that the student can differentiate the different types of text. So this is reading and writing, that they know a narrative and the properties of a narrative, informational writing and reading and those properties, and also opinion writing, moving into persuasive. So also by the end of fourth grade, we want the students to be able to have inference work and be able to cite text evidence, explaining their thinking, but also coming up with their unique ideas and being able to defend them with evidence.
That's great. So parents, that's at the end of the year, okay? So in the beginning of the year, when you just get your second grader or your fourth grader, what are some reading behaviors that you expect and that you try to teach through in August and September?
Ooh, August and September are definitely those reset months where you're trying to get them out of that transition, out of that summer break, not fun, but summer break, like loose vibe. And you're starting to see maybe different gaps in their learning or unfinished learning. So whether that's sight words that they didn't finish picking up in first grade, or letter sounds sometimes, their stamina, especially being in second grade, they're still little, and they may be reading for 2 minutes uninterrupted, or sometimes it's been 30 seconds uninterrupted. And so you definitely start to see where they left off in first grade and where you still need to push to get them where you want them in second grade. So looking at those sight words, looking at those letter sounds, just to make sure that they're ready to go to the next step.
At the start of fourth grade, the students are typically they start with narratives. So narratives tend to be easier for us to connect with because we can find commonality in stories. They can be exciting and interesting, or we can read realistic narratives and then find connections between these stories. So typically at the start, we begin with fictional narratives and realistic narratives. And the students are practicing fluency and reading comprehension, that they're reading sections of text and then can restate what it is that they read in their own words. And also we want them to start to identify tricky words or challenging words. And then we begin to practice how to break down the tougher words.
So fourth grade is when they start identifying like words that they just don't really know, and like building their vocabulary more. Can you explain to us what a narrative is, Nicole? Like for those of the parents that are like, what is that? What is a narrative? What do you mean by that?
Sure. A narrative is typically a made-up story. It will have a setting, characters, and a plot line. What gets tough in fourth grade is there starts to be multiple problems, multiple solutions. And then as you work through these stories, the tougher brain work is in the defining of the theme or the special moral of the story after reading. So those are the made-up stories, basically. Or it can be a story that is inspired by someone's personal life, and then they create a story with their own message.
I love that. Yeah, in fifth grade, we talked about how there's multiple characters and you have to learn character personalities and themes. So fourth grade is when that starts getting introduced, and I appreciate that. So when it comes to second grade, we talked about fluency, right? So it seems like you have to have a timer. Just time them. How long can they stay in attention to a book, right? And once you figure that out, then you can make a record or something on your wall to say, today you did 2 minutes, tomorrow. And do you do the goals with the students? Do you do it for them? Like, how does that work, Raquel? Like, how do you do how do you guide a class of 30 students on building their stamina?
It's definitely tough to get all of their buy-in, but usually we'll use visuals of, sometimes it could be a staircase and we're like, all right, let's go, we're climbing the stairs, and usually there will be a prize or some kind of incentive at the top, pretty much to reward them for being able to read for longer. And, you know, growing as a second grade reader, almost to a third grade reader, we like to always focus on, but we make it, or I make it with the students. So I know that they have that buy-in and we have that mutual connection to the chart, or the growth, the stamina growth chart. So I can keep referring to it and they actually feel it and they believe in it, versus me making it and they're like, oh, I don't know what that says, or I don't care about that. But we have that like pump up of, yeah, we can do it. 10 more seconds.
And do you both start with fiction books, like books that are made up stories, or do you start with nonfiction? Like, how do you choose or select a book that kids will be interested in? Because most kids are like, I don't like reading.
At the start, it's considered a launch. So typically we'll give the students an assortment of books, and we want them to be drawn in and attracted to the type of book, whether it's a narrative or informational, in that launch, to foster that joy of reading. So there's a lot of choice in that launch.
And to piggyback off of Nicole, we usually, in second grade, we usually do start with fiction stories. Once we give them the launch and give them exposure to all those amazing books that they maybe have forgotten about or don't know about yet. Typically we use the fiction stories because one of the second grade standards is to know the different parts of the story. So the character, the setting, and what's happening in the story. And fiction stories it's easy to pull those story elements out for students, especially coming back from summer.
So what do you do if a parent doesn't have a lot of books at home? Like, what would you recommend for them?
I think you can find text in a lot of places other than a book. Right now, there's tons of resources online, just areas of interest, whether it's a magazine or a cookbook or geography, even as you travel around the city. But there's rich text environments all around us, so it doesn't have to be limited to a physical, tangible book.
And with distance learning, it does make it difficult when students can't come into our libraries and pick from what they want and have that physical book, like Nicole mentioned. A lot of students are obsessed with YouTube. It's just the age that we're in. And so there are a lot of read alouds and books that you can look up on YouTube, where either they're read by a narrator or it's just somebody flipping through the book. So students do still have that opportunity to read on their own or have a buddy read with them at home. So there's definitely like the environmental reading that's very rich, and also online.
This is giving me an idea. I think also if you have something you love, let's say it's arts and crafts, there's blogs, there's YouTube tutorials, there's lots of resources tied to something you're interested in, or maybe you go for a walk and you see a flower or an insect that interests you, you can really dive deep into research on something you're interested in. You can find a lot of resources on those things outside of just a book.
I love that you said that, Nicole, and it makes me think about when we teach our students, we teach them in units. So for parents, if your child's into gardening or science or the planets or dinosaurs, buy them books of that content. Because what's going to happen is they're going to want to read it because they're interested in it. And if they're interested in it, as long as they're reading in second grade because they're still learning how to read, and in fourth grade because they're learning how to comprehend, just buy them the book. It's okay if like, Mom, this book is so boring. Dad, this book is so boring that my teacher's giving me. Find out what's their interest because they're most likely going to read it, right? So that's what I'm hearing.
And it is so helpful, like you said, like if your student maybe needs a lot of support in reading, but they love dinosaurs. If you get them books on dinosaurs, they're going to fill their brains with so much background knowledge that it will help them break apart those tricky words in fourth grade, like Nicole mentioned, and just give them that confidence that they can read this book because they have so much background knowledge because they've researched and all of those things.
No, I appreciate that. I'm going to transition us to math, Okay, so think about what are the biggest takeaways that students need to learn in math in second and fourth grade?
The biggest thing for second grade that pretty much builds since day one is they need to leave second grade knowing how to add and subtract up to 3 digits. That means like 345 take away 178. Students should be able to use different strategies or whatever works for them to solve that question pretty quickly. And that's pretty much the focus for second grade. It's just building on those skills. So by the end, they can do that with ease, with a multitude of strategies.
For fourth grade, at the start of the year, it's typically developing number sense to the millions and also getting that fact fluency of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing 12 and under, because those are the baby steps which help build a foundation for what happens later in fourth grade, which is multi-digit adding and subtracting, multi-digit multiplying, and then there's unit conversions, time conversions, and also fractions. So fractions come in also in fourth grade. And then by the end, a lot of that is put into word problems or scenarios where they're having to combine different steps.
Fourth grade sounds hard, Nicole. Like, honestly.
It's intense.
Poor fourth graders, it sounds hard. If you're a fourth grader or teaching a fourth grader, it is hard. So let's talk about number sense. What do you mean by number sense? What does that mean?
I think number sense for me is that you understand your place value, so you can conceptualize it as a single digit, but also for its value. So a 9 is a 9, but depending on where it is and place in its place value spot, it can have a different value. So it's just really understanding place value, the digits, and it as a word as well, or also symbolically, whether it's like base 10 or place value.
Got it. So place value is like the number 5, but then there's a decimal. So is it in front of the decimal? It's a whole 5. So if it's after the decimal, it's 5/10, 5/100, like that, because then it becomes a fraction. So like, how does a decimal and a fraction actually equate to each other? Parents, if you're listening to this for the first time and you're like, I didn't conquer that in fourth grade, you are not the only one. Let me tell you, it is okay. You can look it up. And I want you two to think about what are some websites parents can go to, because honestly, there's a lot of us out there that are like, I actually didn't get that in fourth grade. I didn't master it. I didn't get it taught. I didn't get it taught well, or I'm not a math person. I know a lot of people say that. So if a parent is helping their child at home with fourth grade or second grade math, what are some resources that you gave some of your families this past year?
Resources for fourth grade learning concepts that we don't understand very well. I would say, honestly, there are some great resources on YouTube. There are math songs. There's also math games. There's a lot of free apps even that you can download on your phone or your tablet and practice there. So those are what comes to mind to me at first.
For our second grade babies doing distance learning, a resource that really helped was us filming our own videos and also giving the kids visuals, because when we were in class, visuals are what we thrived on. So no matter what time of the day it was, a student could have that question and look up and solve it for themselves, remembering the steps because we built that chart together. So a lot of what we did during distant learning was providing videos for ourselves the way we know our students are used to learning it, just to give them that familiarity and also like connection to being back at school.
You know, a lot of kids love math, but there's a lot of people that are like, I'm not good at math. Is there any way that a parent or a caregiver can use their home or anything in their home to teach math for second or fourth grade that's like engaging, that'll make it fun, that'll teach them the things they need to learn? Like what tips would you give them?
Oh my goodness, there are so many amazing math connections in the home. And I feel like I also was not strong at math growing up, but I'm getting stronger. And what comes to mind are cooking, because cookbooks have fractions, and sometimes you'll change the recipe for a larger or smaller group of people. So that's also converting units and adding and subtracting fractions. Time, just even setting up the schedule, like how many hours is it till we do this? How many minutes is that? If you're into arts and crafts or sewing, there's geometry and measurement. And anytime you're buying or selling something too, that's an instant math connection.
For second grade, I think something that's not focused on as much as it should be is counting money. So if you have some coins laying around, have students count coins, have them make their own math facts flashcards. You can just get a piece of paper, rip it up, cut it up, whatever you need, and just having that math facts practice just like we have in the classroom can be fun if you have a younger sibling, an older sibling, you're just bored and you're trying to find new ways to keep them busy. Making their own resources is a great idea too.
I love that. We got to make learning fun at home, especially if you're at home all day. So we're going to transition into writing. In every podcast that I've done, writing has been the hardest one. So I'm wondering, in August and September, what do you start doing with your classes when it comes to writing? How do you even start kids with writing? They don't want to write. What do you do?
I think something with second graders is they're fresh first grade. They still might have that shyness about them, about their writing identity. So giving them topics that they love. So what's your favorite movie? Who would be your favorite Avenger or superhero, depending what your class is into, gives them a chance to sketch, which sometimes can take a little bit longer. So you want to cut that sketch time a little bit. But then just writing what they think. And when you have those kids that go, I don't know what to write, tell me about it. And you know that they'll talk about it, and just have them write exactly what they said. So just really building up their confidence that they are writers and helping them identify their writing identity.
Similarly to what Raquel mentioned, we start off writing typically with things of high interest. So one cute activity is all the things we love, and it's like a big heart. And of course, you want to encourage them to draw and write. So they can combine drawing and writing words, but they fill it with people or places or things that they love, and they can also color code it. So it's a fun way of mixing art and writing together. Another really good activity is to draw a map of your house or a special space that you have, and then start adding into your map the things in your house. And then you'll have, and it's sort of a brainstorming activity, because it's oh, this is my desk, and then I have books here, and I have this really good memory of this person coming to teach me something. And so it helps them generate ideas.
Do you both see that kids struggle with writing the most? Is that the one subject that they struggle with the most? A lot?
Yes. I think because there is reading involved. So if your child hasn't mastered their snap words or their sight words, those are words that they lose confidence with their spelling. I feel like spelling is what really holds kids up from fully reaching their writing potential.
So if you have a caregiver that's okay, we're going to write, as a teacher, do you trip up on every spelling word that's misspelled? What's the point of writing at your grade level at this stage of the game in August and September? Is it spelling? Is it those details? Or is it more stamina? Just write. Just tell me what's in your head. What is it? What should a parent in August and September be focusing? Because I know, for instance, a lot of parents are you spelled that word wrong. You spelled that word wrong. And they don't even get through a sentence, right? So what should they be focusing on? And when is it appropriate to focus on that grammar, spelling, periods, capital letters? How do they balance that?
In August and September, parents should be practicing patience when it comes to having their kids write, because it is like those high stakes thing, because people see exactly what you put on the paper. There's no hiding it. There's no trick to it. So definitely for second grade, and it might be the same for fourth, just having them get their ideas out. And again, like reinforcing their writing identity and that they are writers, they can do it. And then later on the year, when you know that your child knows how to read these words, we hope that reading the word will transfer to knowing how to spell the word. Because like the word "the" isn't something you can really sound out, but if they read it fluently, you hope that they are transferring that into their writing as well.
I totally agree. It should just be about brainstorming, getting ideas out, and building stamina. We don't want to shut them down with conventions in the beginning. There's a time and place for it, but not at the start, and not when you're trying to generate a love and a pride in writing.
So when you say writing identity and you say a love and a pride for writing, then the whole point of writing is just write. Just show me what's in your heart and your mind. But when is it a good time to focus on grammar and spelling? Because I know that that's a big deal for a lot of families.
I think what you would hope is when you see that your child is producing writing without, almost without hesitating, or when you see that your child is comfortable with writing their ideas and they can write more than 3 sentences, I would say for second grade, 3 or 4, they're writing pages. Absolutely. Then you can go through and have them read it to you. And there are going to be words that they trip up on. That's when you have them self-correct. Because I think self-correcting is a great strategy to use versus telling them that it's wrong, but it's them coming to that conclusion that it's wrong and figuring out how they can fix it.
So how many minutes a day would you say they should focus on grammar and writing? Because, a lot of parents are starting to have schedules. So writing, how many minutes for a second grader and a fourth grader? And grammar and spelling, how many minutes per day?
I think there can be a little 5 to 8 minute grammar focus. Like you just take one sentence and you analyze that sentence for writing conventions. But like Rotel was saying, if they're writing a piece that's taking a little bit of time, it's often built in stages. So it's first the idea behind the writing and the beginning, middle, and end. And then you can look back at it just for, let's say, periods or capitals. So it can be worked in, but it shouldn't be something that's super intense each day.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you said have them read it to you, because it gives them a pride. Like, I'm going to read it to you. And parents, I know you're busy. I know you're working at home. I know you probably are working full time somewhere else. But if you can have 5 to 10 minutes to show them interest in what they learned that day, they're going to be more interested in school. And I want to talk about that. Let that be a transition into social emotional learning, what we call SEL. And I mean, what we don't talk about enough is how to celebrate our kids. Like what you two do in your classrooms, oh my goodness, I've seen you both teach. If I can only be a second grader and a fourth grader again in your classrooms, like you make kids feel good. So let's talk about like, how often do you celebrate your kids? And like, when is it appropriate to celebrate them? Like what makes you decide how to celebrate kids and why? Like,
I think the first step to that is getting to know your kids, because if you're celebrating something that maybe isn't really meaningful to them, I feel like they tend to pick up on it, that it's inauthentic. And that's where that focus of SEL, that focus of relationship building in our classrooms is so important, and the number one priority whenever we start a year with new babies, if we looped and we have the same group, because you want to know where they need to be celebrated, where they haven't felt successful in the past. So if I have a student who feels really good at writing, but maybe struggles in math, my celebration of their math growth might mean more and push them further towards their grade level goal than maybe something that they're like, oh yeah, okay, like I know I'm good at writing, but that math one might hit a little deeper.
I think as adults, no matter what your profession, if you're, well, whoever you are, you should be constantly pushing yourself to celebrate the people around you as much as you can. But yes, it does need to be authentic, and people know when it's authentic.
I love that. And, you know, parents and caregivers and grandparents and big sisters and brothers, they think, you know, they know their kids or their family members. But I think what you made me think about is celebrate something that's meaningful to them. So, like, when is it appropriate to set goals for the student or with the student? Like, is it appropriate in second grade? Is it appropriate at fourth grade? Like, is that something you do in the beginning of the year?
Beginning of the year, you want to set a goal for the whole class and bring that class together and have that kind of like set the mode. Like, we're going to set goals. We're going to achieve those goals. Now we've set it as a class. Now it's your turn. What's a goal you have? This is a goal I want for you, or like, this is something I want for you as well. It might be the same thing. It might be something different. But again, getting to know your students and how you want to push them to be their best selves.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixture. There's a whole class goal typically, and then we want to foster the kids to set their own goals because then they have ownership over what they're reaching for. But we also want to offer them goals that we think will help them grow too. So it's a nice mixture.
So that makes me think, like, if a parent is at home and they don't have a whole class, they have 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, do they set a goal with all their kids as a like incentive? Would that help? Or do they set a goal with each individual kid? Like, what would you recommend to some of the families that you serve?
I would definitely set an individual goal for each kiddo because each kiddo is different and unique and will have a different goal.
And to balance that, maybe not even taking it to academics, but as a whole family, as a whole family, we're going to keep our house clean. We're going to set a goal where every Wednesday we watch a movie together, or we read your writing together, or something like that. Again, to make goal setting a normal thing, or like an everyday practice. So it's not like, oh, my mom is pushing me to do this, but I don't want to. But it's like, no, we set goals all the time. This is just what we do.
I love that. Go ahead, Nicole.
That makes me think that we also should be modeling setting our own goals too, which is something we sometimes forget. So we want to also model it for them and show them that we're doing it ourselves.
Nicole, what a great reminder. Like, kids don't learn by what we say, they learn by what we do. So imagine if I, as a parent, set a goal for myself, like, I'm going to make sure I do this, and like I share it, then they know goals are something that happens at every age. I love that. And I really appreciate what you said, Raquel. Like, why can't this be a family celebration? Why can't we say, you know what, Friday night, we're going to spend, you bring me your proudest work for the week, whatever it is. And we're going to each share our proudest work. And me as a parent, I might bring something I did at work. And like, one, it bonds you like a family, and it says, in this family, we always try our best. Or in this family, we talk about the work, or we talk about bring your biggest mistake that you learned from this week. So it normalizes that you mess up and that you make things. What are some ways that you teach SEL, either through designated time, like you teach it through these 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or through integrated time, like you find ways to fit it in throughout the day because stuff happens? Like, give me some examples of that.
Recess is a perfect example of where SEL just naturally gets integrated. Whenever, honestly, in the classroom, anytime kids are interacting, there's bound to be a learning moment or a plug where you're like, yes, this lesson, let's do this because this is relevant to us. I think something as a teacher is when you teach something in isolation, it doesn't have the effect that it should unless you embed it so it is like it affects every part of your life. Phonics, it affects every part of your life because you need to learn how to read and see letters and all those things. And the same goes for SEL, because as we grow up, as we live our lives, things come up and we need to know strategies of how to deal with them in the best way possible.
I definitely agree. I think it should be a mix, that there should be time to learn new objectives, but the best evidence of strong SEL is that it's integrated throughout the day and you're seeing it as part of their interactions with each other.
So let's think about second and fourth grade, because you're teaching it, but then you're saying you're having learning moments. So when you think about a second grader and the things that they're like, becoming aware of, or a fourth grader and what they're becoming aware of, what are some of the strategies that you give them in second grade or fourth grade to deal with that age? Like, what are some of the common things that come up at second grade or fourth grade that you're like, every year I'm teaching this?
I think something that comes up a lot with second graders is how to deal with friends, or if they want to play if they don't get chosen for the soccer team, or if they're not, or soccer team at recess, and if they're not playing the right way, or those types of like little tiffs that they have with each other. It's more of I feel like the biggest strategy is how to take deep breaths and how to learn how to solve the problem. So it's green means, okay, I'm going to think about what went wrong. Yellow is I'm going to pause and think of different strategies I can use to solve the problem. And then red is like, okay, I'm going to act that out. I'm going to stop and reflect. Did it work? If it didn't work, what could I do to make it work, essentially? So giving kids those strategies it's okay to stop, it's okay to process, and calm down before you react, pretty much.
Nicole, before you respond, I want to dive in deep to second grade. Okay, so what parents don't know, or maybe you do, in kinder and first, there's a lot of telling. Like, teacher, he's doing wrong. Teacher, they hurt me. Teacher. And like, so the teacher teaches them to be more independent. By second grade, they are a little bit more independent and they're learning to solve their own problems. So they know I have a problem, I have a reaction to the problem, and you're giving them strategies to fix the problem. So what I heard from you is like, one of the things is like, how to even talk to friends, make friends, be a friend. And then the second one is when you're disappointed, how do you like react to that? So what are some strategies that you tell them on how to pause and solve the problem instead of either crying or hitting, because it's a normal thing, or telling like, Miss Martis, they did this. Like, what are some strategies that you give them in second grade to solve the problem?
So for sure, when these problems come up, they are still in that telling phase where they're like, Miss Martis, or they're like upset, or they're like isolated. So usually it all starts with having a conversation, and they have had experience, hopefully in kinder and first, learning about those different feelings and what they mean, what they look like, what they feel like. So the hope is that they can calm down enough to articulate that to me, and then we process together of more questioning them. Okay, what happened? Okay, what could you have done? What could they have done? What do you need to feel better? How can we make this work? Just different things like that to talk them through the process. But the biggest key is having them able to articulate how they're feeling, how their friends would be feeling, and kind of get their brain to the solution on their own.
That's great. Okay, so now let's transition to fourth grade. What's happening in a fourth grade mind and emotion?
Oh, goodness. Because fourth graders are in that 8 to 10 range, their emotions are getting much more multifaceted. So typically SEL in fourth grade is about identifying the emotion you're actually feeling. So that might be a body scan. We also use the stop, process, problem solve before going. But in fourth grade, the focus is a lot more on like identifying the feeling or emotion that they are experiencing. And if there is a problem, let's say interpersonal in school, that they have more tools to explain how they're feeling instead of just bottling it up or getting angry or upset.
So that's really good. I am glad to hear that. I think it's important to know like identifying emotions, because most kids are like, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm happy. But there's so many nuanced emotions. Like, actually, you're hungry. Actually, you're stressed out. Because fourth grade, we talked to our third grade teachers, and they said third grade is the first year that they start taking like state tests and more important tests. So fourth grade is like another year of that. So, and then they read like longer chapter books, right? So school becomes a little stressful, and fractions, oh my goodness, don't even get me started. They're stressful. So, and they're writing multi-paragraph essays. So like not just one paragraph, like in second grade, but like 3 or 4 paragraphs. So you're showing them different vocabulary.
Yes. So we are developing a vocabulary about our own emotions and then trying to come up with strategies to solve problems. It can be, in fourth grade, there is test anxiety, academic anxiety. Peers can often have conflicts that are a little bit complicated. And so a lot of times we just want to encourage them to be able to first stop, identify their own feelings, and then try to communicate. One thing that comes to mind is like the I phrase, like I'm feeling this, but only when you're ready. And then asking the person maybe that you're having a problem with what you need from them, like would you consider, and using because in their statements just so they can try to communicate their needs.
Wondering, like, at what age is it appropriate to start mindfulness? And by that I mean like breathing, meditation. Like, when is it appropriate to introduce that? Like, at what age?
As early as possible. Obviously, it's not realistic for a 2-year-old to have a 5-minute mindfulness lesson, but absolutely our kinders need it, especially after lunch, after being out in the hot sun and playing with their friends, and they just need that time to come back and collect themselves and calm down and chill.
A parent struggling with getting a hold of their teacher or the school or the principal, they're not getting the resources or the support that they need. Like, how can a parent set their child up for success in second and fourth grade if they feel like, hey, the school's not responding the way I want them to, or they're not giving me the resources I need or the schedule I need? What would you recommend to that parent? Like, is there resources that they can use on their own? Is there ways to get a hold of the school? What would you have done? Or how do parents get a hold of you?
Multi-layered, depending on the situation. I know that at the beginning of this year, we've given out our contact information, so we do have that transparency with parents. And I think having like a school Instagram or a teacher Instagram, that way, if parents are on Instagram, everyone's on Instagram. So at least if that's kind of one way to get a hold of them.
So hopefully in distance learning, some ways to reach out are through Zoom. You can have personal Zoom IDs where if your Zoom is activated, the kiddos can come into your meetings directly. You can also, there's a lot of interactive G Suite materials like Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Classroom, where you can also comment to each other. But definitely there's also outside resources like Khan Academy. But also I think the best way to go is just to keep reaching out. Typically teachers and parents have the same end goal. And so that's an important relationship. And I hope that it's fostered wherever the students are.
That's what we're here for. We're here for the parents, like Nicole had said. Our goal is the same, to do the best by your student. And if that means that I'm calling you at 8 in the morning or whenever you need them to get up, or reminding them, turn your device off before you go to bed, you better be in bed before 2 in the morning. Distance learning bedtimes are out the window.
Raquel actually mentioned this earlier today, but she also said that it's important to make sure they're getting to bed early, to wake up early, that we're turning off devices. And yes, I have done some wake up calls, wake up texts, but as long as you are having communication with your parents and students, it should be fine.
I hear that. So I'm hearing like, have a great relationship with your teacher as best as possible, and put your child on a routine. Like, even if it's hard for you to go to sleep or wake up at a certain time, like, it's for the best of your family to put them, because kids need a routine. They need to wake up and go to sleep at the same time. Like, they're creatures of habit, which is why any elementary school teacher would tell you their day looks exactly the same. In the morning, in the afternoon, before they go to home, they always look the same, because a kid, this is why a student watches the same Disney movie 4 or 5 times, right? Like, kids like repetition, routine.
Absolutely. And I think going on distance learning, I think a lot of us realize that we are those creatures of habit, that not having our schedule every day of like, oh, this is my recess break time, this is my lunch time, this is my phonics time. It's kind of thrown us all for a loop. But recognizing that we are creatures of habit, it's important, like we said earlier, to model what time we go to bed, what time we wake up, and just having that routine for ourselves and for them. Self-care.
Parents, we're wrapping up. Today we are talking about 2nd and 4th grade. And just to let you know, reading, we were talking about reading in 2nd grade is when they're still at the end of learning to read. So they're learning more vocabulary. They're starting to get into chapter books. They're learning to read fluently. And in 4th grade, they're getting bigger text, differentiated text, different characters. So if you don't have a lot of books at home, think about magazines or cookbooks or things around the house, or YouTube that has a lot of books and readings, on read alouds online. But most importantly, get something that your child is interested in and get them a book in that, because they'll most likely read that. For math, it sounds like 2nd grade is adding and subtracting double digits up to 3 digits. And 4th grade is, my goodness, multiplication, division, fractions, place value. All right, parents, YouTube it. And then writing is like creating their writing identity, who they are as writers. Just write about whatever is passionate to you. But if you are having some trouble with your child on spelling and grammar, spend about 5 to 8 minutes on it. No more than that. Today, we're going to spend 5 minutes on spelling. Today, we're going to spend 5 minutes on just where you put the period or when to do capital letters, because that's really, it gets boring for a kid. You don't want to spend too much time on it. And then social emotional learning. Talk to them about their feelings. Set a goal with them at the beginning of the year. Put up their class schedule. Put a routine. Talk to them about problem solving. Talk to them about their feelings. It is normal. Raquel or Nicole, is there anything you want to add for a parent to take away for today?
Just have patience. We're all learning in this, teachers alike as well, going through distant learning. So just have patience and set goals. Yeah. Set goals with your kids, set goals with your family, and take care of yourself.
I think my ending thought is just remember to celebrate yourself and your children in an authentic way. These are tough times, so we need to celebrate and love each other.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Nicole. Parents, I'm ending every podcast with this. This podcast is to help you understand the age level of your child, because you know your child best, and you were not prepared, or maybe you were, to be a teacher at home. And you have full-time responsibilities that were not this. Nobody planned for this. So I just want to remind you that you are enough, parents, and that whatever you're doing, it is on the right track, and whatever you're learning, you're improving, and you're showing your child, look, if I didn't do it right the first time, I'm going to get better. And that's okay. And so please give me feedback. Please let me know if you have any questions. Make comments on the YouTube, ask questions so that we can bring content to you that's actually going to help you give distance learning, virtual learning at home. Parents, like I said before, I appreciate you. You are enough. Keep doing an amazing job. Bye, families.